Last year, I finally finished my Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition starter set, only about 30 years after it came out, so pretty good for a Warhammer player. But looking at them in my cabinet, I suddenly realised that no, that was a big fat lie. Among all of these beautifully painted retro minis, I haven't painted the base on the cardboard cutout Ork Dreadnought yet. So let's take care of it. It's a unique base, only used for this model I think, as far as I'm aware, but correct me in the comments if you know otherwise. A little coat of super glue on the flat surface, a little drizzle of some sand, wait for it to dry, then a blast of grey primer, and hey, it's the last thing, let's go all out and use the original Goblin green paint from the 90s. A little dry brush with sunburst yellow, and then a final rim of Goblin green. Let's slot you in. Perfect. Well, that's it, I guess. End of the series. The Ork Dreadnought is done, and I guess that's the end of the video. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now. Bye-bye. See ya. Wouldn't wanna be ya. I think they're gone. Can you keep a secret? Come here. Come here. You promise you cannot tell anyone. Okay. Look at this. Look at this. This is the Flat Death Dread. It's a 3D printable model designed by Morgoth, which uses some really clever forced perspective and weird geometry to give it the same sort of cartoonish look as the classic cardboard Dreadnought's artwork. So let me show you how I printed and painted it. This model is available for free on Cults, but I won't include the link because even though it's been available for 3 years and has had 27,000 views and 1,500 downloads, if I include a link and it gets taken down, the 3D printing Warhammer community will put the blame squarely on me with absolutely no sense of self-awareness or irony. Now, it's been about 3 or 4 months since I printed anything using my Uniformation GK2, which is my 3D printer, and I left the resin in the vat because it wasn't something that had any urgency, so I totally forgot about it. Do I funnel it out and deep clean the machine? Absolutely not. Let me show you the disgusting slobby way that I do it. First off, I close the blinds to block out any sunlight, and I even turn off my RGB lights just in case, because they definitely give off some non-visible light that really excites glowy stuff, so maybe it's UV reactive, I don't know. Then I glove up and give the vat a little swoosh around with my silicone spudger thing to make sure there's nothing stuck to the film at the bottom. I might need a little bit more resin actually, throwing in some of this Sunlu ABS-like resin because it was cheap and I've heard lots of people recommend it. I gave the build plate a wipe with IPA to make sure it was clean, and then I just make the build plate go to 0, which is right down against the film, and then up by 10mm a few times, maybe like 10, I don't know, to remix the resin. Will it work? I don't know, probably, hopefully. I left it printing overnight, and in the morning, yes, done. We've got some dreads. I popped them off the build plate, gave them a soak and a clean and some IPA. I removed all of the supports, and then I gave another sort of detail clean with an alcohol soaked brush, and then a few extra seconds in the curing station to firm up and reduce the tackiness. I mean, I should probably throw myself in there, to be honest. Now, the files actually include 3 different versions: a regular model, a flat relief style version of the model for maximum retro cuteness, and a really interesting artsy hybrid of the model with a card-shaped frame. I love them all, but I decided to let the channel's Patreon supporters decide which one got painted up for the video, and they chose the regular model. I mean, that's expected to be fair, probably for the best because the flat version didn't print that well. I don't think I got the angles or the supports right, I don't know. Before we carry on, how much is a Death Dread these days? 40 quid, Jesus. Okay, well, let's tip the designer 40 quid for his troubles, and let's get painting. First off, a tiny bit of super glue under the feet, and I'm sticking it to a little plastic shot glass for easy handling. Now, I've obviously got loads of old 90s paints that would work perfectly for this retro Death Dread, but it's not really an old model, it just looks like one, it's new. So let's use some new paints on it. I'm going to use my new core paint set from TT Combat and see what we can do with it. And maybe it'll give you an idea of why I chose those particular colours and the particular brand for my first paint set after about 6 years of trial and error and development. So I gave the model a black prime to start off with, but to make sure all of the nooks and crannies are definitely black and didn't escape the spray, I gave everything a quick coat of the black from the set with a big brush. To build up some quick highlights on the black armour, I mixed some Admiralty grey in with that black on the palette, and using a makeup sponge, smooshed it all around onto the top facing parts, trying to catch all of the prominent bits, but kind of paying less attention to the legs. First time for everything, I guess. After a few sparing dabs with the pure grey paint, I added a tiny touch of white paint into the grey, and did some very light off-white dry brush highlights onto the harder edges, again putting my focus mostly on the top. I find models often get that kind of dusty residue after this kind of dry brushing, so before I put any more paint down, I just gave the model a quick go over with a moist brush to capture all of that dust. Now I'm going to use a black wash to darken everything down and also add some recess shading. The washes from the set perform like a mix between a traditional shade paint like Nuln Oil and a contrast paint. I'm not sure how they've done it, but it doesn't do that nasty tide marking across flat surfaces. It's really good stuff, quite subtle. If you want a heavier effect, wait for it to dry and then add another coat, but one was fine for what I wanted here. Okay, let's start blocking in some colours. The model's checker patterns, thankfully, stick out with some relief, which is fortunate because they are a real pain in the butt cheeks to freehand. So using the white thinned with a little bit of water, I added the first thin coat onto them. Unfortunately, no escaping freehand on this one though, because the artwork also has a little glyph on the side of the heavy bolter, so I sketched on a little square and filled it in. Pretty decent coverage with just one thin coat, but a second will make the colour much more bold, especially over the black. Time for some red, I think. I chose the Viscera red for this set because it's a big, bold colour and it covers beautifully even when it's thinned down. I mean, for one coat, that's astonishing over black, but like the white, I'll give it another coat to smooth out the coverage. Quickly tidying up any mistakes after that with some black mixed with the black wash. Nice. The set also contains another wash, an umber wash, which is great for shading anything that's remotely warm toned. I'm not slathering it on here though, I'm just adding a sort of pin wash to all of the recesses and the rivets. Looking good, looking good. Okay, back to the red for a quick tidy up of any of the bits where I was a bit sloppy, which was most places to be fair. And then I mixed up a quick highlight colour for the red by adding some buttercup yellow. Red is a bit of a tricky colour to highlight. If you add white, it starts looking pink, and if you add yellow, it starts looking orange, but Retro Warhammer does have that eye-popping Technicolor red that kind of leans a little bit orangey anyway, but a few sparing highlights along the edges and top-facing sides of the rivet should bring out the details without changing the overall perceived colour too much. Also, rather than highlight some parts of it as if they were a model, I referenced the actual artwork and manually placed the highlights to match. Oh, by the way, this is why I narrate videos after filming instead of using the camera audio. The little armor plate under the body has a little explosion glyph on it, so sticking with that pure buttercup yellow, I just freehanded it on with 2 thin coats rather than one thick one. That's surprisingly neat. Shocked myself actually. The shiny steel bits have a slight blue hue to them, so to move the gunmetal paint that comes in the set into a sort of cooler tone, added a touch of the EAA blue. Just a tiny bit will do. The pistons got a coat, the flagpole got a coat, and even the little spikers inside the claws too. Some black wash mixed with a teeny touch of that blue again to make a cooler tone dark wash, and using that I did some simple recess shading on the metallic bits. This very thin dark blue would also probably be a really good colour to sketch out the shape of the little mech tool glyph on the heavy bolter. A little extra blue to mix in once the shape is there, filling it out, and some black wash to sharpen up the edges of the glyph too. Yeah, nice. A little bit of gunmetal paint and some streaks on the pistons to just make the focus points a little bit extra shiny. And while that blue is still wet on the palette, let's use some to block in that lens on the las cannon, adding a touch of white bit by bit to get that lighter arc towards the top and a dot on the opposite side. Now, the exhausts and some of the cables have this kind of rusty brown shiny metallic look to them. Now, rather than do the same trick as the pistons and add a little bit of brown to the gunmetal to shift the tone, I think this would have been an absolutely perfect place to use the vintage paint tin bits, but that hasn't been made for about 28 years. So instead, I'm going to use this tin gubbins paint, which is one of the paints included in my booster set. which are generally paints and colours that I use a lot in my videos but don't form part of the core 14 paint classic colour palette that I use in my speed painting videos. It's got such a unique look, really rich and really shiny. I totally love it. This can also be shaded with black wash too, easy peasy. Back to the grey to base coat the smoke billowing out of the heavy bolter and the exhaust stacks, and some black wash over those too. I kind of forgot about the glyphs on the banner too. Better mark out the shapes with a few thin coats of white. I'll tidy up the edges with some black paint mixed with black wash for a better consistency, and then using one of my tiniest brushes, I think this thing probably has about 10 hairs, I did my best to paint on the glyphs. Now it's not true freehand because there's a bit of relief there, but man, it's still pretty tricky. Yeah, that'll do. Some white dry brushed onto the smoke to catch the textures, and yeah, again, a moist brush to removal of that white dust that's now flicked off. And one of the final steps, some edge highlighting on the black armour using white mixed with the grey to create a kind of neutral off-white. Not everywhere, just a few key spots to give the armour a little lift. Alrighty, I think it's time to snap you off. Said let's snap, you little nice. Let's crack out the doggy fire engine lunchbox of doom and find a base the right size. Now, the bigger 60mm bases, I mean they're actually about 65, but whatever, that would fit perfectly and is the current size of Death Dread bases, but there's something undeniably appealingly retro about his little toes overhanging the base like all of the 90s models did, so I think I'm going to go with a 50mm base. Now, I've already shown you this right at the start of the video as a kind of joke, but you know what? The green paint that comes in the set, Gondola Green, not only covers really beautifully in one coat, which isn't really a huge surprise because greens tend to, but it's not a million miles away from the tone of Goblin Green either. Anyway, a dry brush of that buttercup yellow on top, which is really nice and opaque for a yellow paint, so dry brushing comes out really vibrant, and then let's stick him down. Finally, a coat of the OG Goblin Green on the rim. Beautiful. There we go. What a cool model. Absolute props to the creator. Such an interesting design and creative use of forced perspective. Reminds me of that exceptional sculpt of the Chaos Terminator they did for the Warhammer Plus free mini a few years ago. Amazing. I just wish I knew who sculpted that because Games Workshop don't tell you anymore. Whoever you are, you're a legend. If watching this video has maybe piqued your interest in the Midwinter Minis core paint set, you can find the pre-order link in the video description. There's also a link to the booster set as well if you want all of the alternative paints, and you can get them both together for a bundle price if you'd prefer to do that. Well, now this guy is finally finished and painted, I guess I can retire the old cardboard Dreadnought back to the box. Or I could just use them both and totally annihilate all the Space Marines. If only I knew somebody who was an expert on Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition who lived really nearby and might be willing to play a game with me, but I just can't think of one.
What? Someone somewhere wants to play a 2nd edition battle report. Quickly, to the car!